First things first, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm alright, thanks. What I want to start with is, do you remember the first album you ever bought?
Do you want the cool answer or the honest answer?
The honest answer first.
The honest answer is, I didn't... Actually, the first one I bought was a pop band called Hearsay.
Okay.
So like the first kind of X Factor band.
So with those opening doors or something,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And I think the first sort of couple of records I was given was ABBA Gold.
Okay.
And the Smurfs Go Pop, which was a kind of weird, like, compilation of people with octavated voices singing popular songs at the time.
Okay.
The first kind of record I bought with any sort of like musical knowledge was Highly Evolved by the VANT.
Okay.
And that kind of changed my life really.
In what way?
It was like Nevermind to me. It was like, you know, my version of Nirvana, because
Okay.
I came out when I was like 11 years old and it just blew me away. And Craig Nicholls was just, I thought he was like the coolest person in the world, and I loved the way that he performed, and it kind of just made me want to play music and be him basically. And that kind of sort of paved the way for, you know, the next sort of 10, 15 years of my life, I guess.
And where you are now, if you look back at that album, do you still listen to it?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's still...
Not like it's regular. I used to listen to it like, you know, probably every day at one point, but I still listen to it like a couple of times a year or something, and it still excites me and makes me realise that it was a turning point in my life, I think.
In hindsight then, what was it about the music that had such a lasting effect on you?
I think, to be honest, it was more the kind of the performance element.
Okay.
So like I'd go around my friend's house and he had like MTV or something, and we'd watch like the MTV Rocks channel, whatever it was, and I just remember like how powerful the videos were and how explosive his performance was. And I think at the time he was kind of like the most interesting performer. You know, you had a lot of bands like the Strokes and stuff, just kind of their whole thing was standing still, but I liked the fact that he was kind of destructive, and you know, whenever they did like a live performance on TV, he'd probably spend most of the time smashing his guitar up rather than actually playing the song. And I think to me that was just like, that was what rock and roll is about, you know, it's kind of that danger, that sort of unpredictability. And I think that's kind of what made me so excited by the Vines, and that's kind of what I wanted to do, you know, is just have that element of fearlessness.
Sure. And before that album, before that point, what role did music play for you?
I guess it had always been like part of my conscious, like you know, like my dad would play records in the car, or like my mum would play records in the house, and like my mum has a fucking terrible taste in music, so it was like a lot of it was growing up with like, you know, really bad pop acts like Boyzone or like Westlife or whatever, and Shania Twain, that kind of thing. And I think it was just, you know, I mean, it definitely taught me like pop sensibility, I guess, or give me an awareness of like the world outside of like your comfort zone. But like, I think it was like my dad started like playing me kind of like, you know, records that he liked when I was around 10, 11, like Zeppelin and Pink Floyd and sort of that stuff. I think the first sort of couple of shows I ever went to was like an Eagles tribute act in the Australian Pink Floyd, which are like meant to be one of the best cover bands in the world kind of thing. And I think then it was just like, yeah, I kind of get it, but like I wanted that element of like self-discovery, and sort of luckily for me it was kind of, that was when the indie scene sort of became massive, and you had like all those bands like Franz Ferdinand and Arctic Monkeys and the Strokes. And I think it was kind of like strange for me because it was when I started making music, it kind of started fading out, so it was kind of, I almost missed the boat because of the age that I was. And then, you know, over time it started to come back in again now, with bands like Royal Blood and Wolf Alice and Catfish and the Bottom and all those kind of acts. So it's kind of opened the door for a lot more alternative rock music again, which is obviously something that we're trying to capitalise on now.
Sure. And when you started making music yourself, was it immediately, well, the mentality that you had, that fearlessness, that is what you wanted to do, to have a good live performance?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was kind of always quite natural to me, whether or not it was like, you know, whether or not I was forcing it, I don't know, like, but I always felt comfortable kind of not particularly worrying about how good the guitar sounded and more about how much energy I could put into it, purely because I don't come from a theoretical background. Like, I'm self-taught, and I'd be the first person to admit that I'm not the greatest guitarist in the world, but you know, I'm a good songwriter and I can sing, so the guitar is kind of almost secondary to what I do, and you know, I've got better over the years, but at the time it was all about finding a good rhythm section that could kind of keep everything solid, and then I would just be free to do whatever I wanted to do. And I think I've tried to keep that element while also trying to play guitar well. But it just kind of, yeah, I don't know, like I didn't ever feel any pressure. I just always felt like it was what I was meant to do. I know that sounds kind of like a cliche, but my whole life I felt like I'm meant to play music, and regardless of my ability or whatever, it just kind of always drove me to continue to do it. And then one day someone sort of said, you know, we want to sign you, and then gave me the opportunity to do it full time. So I think it's all about belief, self-belief particularly.
Well, the confidence that you talk about, which I think, I agree, it's quite important. So where did you derive that confidence from? Was it the songwriting? Was it the...
I think it's just the fact that, particularly for me, because I come from a very poor area of the UK, and you know, I went to a really bad school, like probably in like the bottom like 5% of schools, and most of the kids around me, like, you know, their ambition was to work at like the local McDonald's or the local factory, and kind of get a wife and have kids and hopefully be able to afford a house at some point or whatever. Whereas, like, you know, I was quite fortunate that my parents, because I was an only child, like they could take me on holiday like once a year in the summer, like nowhere glamorous or anything, but like, you know, like going to like a little Greek island or whatever. Or, and I think that kind of desire to explore kind of stemmed from that, and the fact that I'd seen sort of, you know, 8 to 10 kind of different places over my childhood. And that always really excited me, and I kind of understood as well, because the local music scene in the northeast of England, same sort of thing as the indie scene. It had like a lot of great bands in the early 2000s, and then it sort of began to die off, just like everything else, just as I was like ready to be a part of it. And I think because of that, it kind of made me realise that I needed to move away and try and work to give myself an opportunity to do it. And obviously the natural draw is always London in the UK, because it's where most bands go to get signed or get noticed. And I kind of went to Brighton for a couple of years as a stepping stone, and then when I moved to London, it was kind of, yeah, just all about networking and getting out, and, you know, living on no money a month, but also feeling incredibly excited to be part of like a prestigious scene and meeting people. And you know, eventually it kind of led to us signing with Parlophone, and it was a risk worth taking.
Sure. At this point, when you moved to London, did you have a lot of songs written already?
It was kind of, I'd gone through, like, Brighton for me was like a bit of a sort of experimentational period. I started making punk music when I was like 16, and then when I moved to Brighton when I was about 19, I kind of thought that the way to make the music was to sort of conform to what is deemed to be popular. So at the time it was like folk music, and then that didn't work, so then I started trying to make like electronic music, but it never felt like natural to me. And with my first band, although we never kind of, you know, got signed or whatever, like we did really well on like a local scene front, and we got played on national radio a couple of times, and we did loads of cool things, but it was because it came from such an honest place, an honest, natural place, and nothing felt difficult. Whereas when I started making stuff that wasn't true to me as a person, it kind of, there was a lot of friction and a lot of barriers, and it was very difficult to kind of overcome them. And then when I moved to London, I kind of just went, you know what, I just want to make music that I love and care about. And at the time I was kind of really frustrated by the fact that there wasn't really any rock bands talking about important issues or about politics, and I think at that point in my life I'd kind of started to become a lot more interested in that sort of side of things myself. So then I was like, well, I want to make punk music again. I've got something to write about now. And then I kind of, you know, wrote about 30 songs in about 3 months, and it was just really easy. And when I kind of showed them to my manager and a few other people, they were like, that's what you need to do. So then the next kind of year and a half of living in London was about developing that and recording that, and at the same time not really like pushing it too much. Like we wanted to have everything kind of ready to go, because the intention was to release a record on our own. We didn't really care about labels or anything like that. It was just, we believed in the music and we wanted to get it out, and we made it for, you know, relatively as cheap as we could, and but that's what the label loved, and that's why they signed us. And you know, we've used a lot of those tracks from the early recording sessions, and we recorded in the same way with the same producer for the rest of the album, so it's kind of very much true to its roots. And I think that's something that we want to maintain, you know, throughout our careers, is that element of like ease and kind of the urge to get something out, because out of necessity rather than out of, you know, just for the sake of it.
Sure.